Welcome, kiddies! Orville's got the right idea. Hello, boys and girls. Oh, yeah.
There we go.
Yes. Hello, kiddies. I've been rewatching that lately. I've been enjoying that again. I've been rewatching Tales from the Crypt lately, and it's like shit. The travel back to the 80s and the 90s.
Yeah, I'd seen some of those, but I can't remember what I watched.
Hell, Leah Thompson and Demi Moore were in one. I was like, shit. And they were evil women, man. Evil women.
They didn't have to work hard, did they? Sorry.
How the hell are you?
I'm doing pretty special. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Good evening, everyone. Big good evening to Dave, Bob, Psychodorf 9. Oh, I'm sorry. Psychodorf 9! Purple Valkyrie, Spike and Madness, the Catman, a.k.a. D.D. Myers, Andrew 46 and 2, Dave Bob, my brother from another mother. How are you doing, brother? Chris Persia, the Wrench of Wrenches, is here. Good evening, Chris. How are you all doing? Did I see Mark in there? Is Mark in here? Mark, if you're in there, give me a what's up. Lady Miss, the Guardian of the Void, is here, ladies and gentlemen. Project Storytime. Josh, how are you doing? How are you all doing this evening? I hope you all are doing well. But good evening to you all. We've got a great show coming to you tonight. And Adega, what are you doing, man? What are you doing?
I want to say it's very nice to see everybody.
Yes.
Very, very good to have the Valhalla family together this evening. And what am I doing? I'll tell you, I've been doing some weird reading lately. You know, I don't have a lot of time because I'm trying to crank through some of these books. But I came across, and I like going to really, really old texts. And I found one that, according to several sources, this guy spent 20 years off the books. He was a Catholic priest and disappeared for 20 years. This is the turn of life. He's Victorian, 18-something. He died in 1928. And he wrote this book about some of the things that he did when he was gone. And he swears that everything he has in the book is true. But, you know, it was 100 years ago, 140 years ago. And the name of the book is, and this is what intrigued me, because he studied everything from witches and various different things. And he swore to his dying breath that witches needed to be killed. So he was kind of a heretic, extremist. But he wrote this book. It's called The Vampire, His Kith and Kin. The gentleman's name, and you could find this because if you don't buy it on Amazon, that's fine, because no one's getting any royalties except for the people that print it. It's long since over. His name is Montague Summers. And so I figured, you know, ever since I was a kid, I always was fascinated by vampires. You know, there's so many different things, and I wanted to get into this to see what it was like to get from someone who says they're an authoritarian on it and avoids all the BS. Like there are stories where for vampires, I don't know if you guys know, where if you take grain, usually rice, and you put it on your window sills, you know, big piles of it, or your doors or what have you, anywhere they can get in the home, a vampire will start or stop there and won't move until it counts every single grain, which, you know, of course, you know, the garlic thing, all of that stuff. I got into, you know, how you can bury a vampire or how vampires are created, and they're not all just by bites. Some say that if a crow circles over your casket before you're buried, you're going to be a vampire. Or if a dog jumps over your casket before you're buried, you're going to be a vampire. There's several interesting things that I studied long ago, and I figured, you know, I'm going to get back into it. So I found this guy, and his first chapter is everything about what isn't a vampire, which I thought was kind of funny. So he gets into demons and various different things, and apparently, you know, he's supposed to be an authoritarian on this stuff. And I came across, and these are stories from 1840. I think the other ones, I'll get at the date later, but they're almost 200 years old. And apparently, they had witnesses, people that back up these stories that say they're absolutely true. Now, the way he writes in his book, there's a lot of different references. Things are edited really strange. So if I get interrupted, not only is it me being a bad reader, but it is also because it's written really weird. So I'll get into this. Make sure I got the right one. Yeah, he's quoting a story from Andrew Lang. The story was Dreams and Ghosts. It was supposed to be a real story. The Ghost That Bit, which might seem to be a vampire, but which actually, since vampires can't be classified as a vampire since they have no body and their craving for blood is to be obtained substances for their body, which why he wrote it that way, I don't know. This is just short. I'm going to get in the real meat in a minute. The narrative is originally to be found in the notes of Quatrain's 3rd September 1864, and the correspondent asserts that the book is almost verbatim from the lips of the lady who is concerned. A person tried veracity, Emma S. and blank, 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 was asleep one morning in her room. And this is a kind of a cool story. I know some people that are listening can relate to this. Was asleep in her room one morning at a large house near Kinnock Chase. I assuming these are all English towns. Purple can correct me if I'm wrong. It was a fine August day in 1840, but although she had bidden her maid call, let me go through that again. But although she had bidden her maid call her at an early hour, she was surprised to hear a sharp knock upon her door at 3:30. This is in the early hours. In spite of her answer, the taps continued, and suddenly the curtains of her bed were slightly drawn. When to her amaze, she saw the face of her aunt by marriage looking through upon her. Half unconsciously, she threw out her hand, and immediately one of her thumbs was sensibly primed by the teeth of the apparition. Forthwith she arose, dressed, and went downstairs, where not a creature was stirring. Her father, upon coming down, railed her a little upon being at the cock-crow, and inquired the cause. When she informed him, he determined later that in the day he would pay a visit to his sister-in-law, who dwelt at no great distance. This he did only to discover that she had unexpectedly died at 3:30 in the morning. She had not been in any way ailing, and the shock was fearfully sudden. One of the thumbs of the corpse was found as marked as if had been bitten in the last agony. So that's supposed to be a documented story where this girl got bit on her thumb by her aunt who had died the same time she saw her. Anyway, that's a side one. This is one that actually has a bunch of really cool validation to this story. And for all intents and purposes, you could take this as something that really did happen. This, you're going to see, I don't know if Loki has it. It'll be the picture of a rail station. I don't know if this is the actual rail station itself, but it's the one that came along with what I was read. In ghost history, there are many mentions of encounters of ghosts which result in violence. The most famous case. I'm going to put my glasses on so I'm stop stumbling around. Sorry, folks. The most famous case in that of a novelist, Captain Frederick Mayert, who, while staying at Rainham Hall, descended to a ghost hunt. While walking along an upstairs hallway, he encountered the hall's infamous brown lady. She was carrying a lantern and glided past them through a door. Marriott noticed she was grinning at him, so he leapt out and fired a pistol at her, sending the bullet straight through her head, lodging into the wall. There have been many questions about Marriott's claims, but none so on the following. It goes on to another ghost story. This one is about James Durham, and the place is at Darlington. It was called Night Watchman's Encounter with the Fight of a Ghost. This one's a little easier to read, so here we go. James Dunham gave a witness statement to Reverend Harry Kendall, and a congressional minister in the late 19th century at Darlington. The statement said that James Durham was a night watchman at the old Darlington and Stockton station, dated 9th of December, 1890. I was at night watchman at the old, this is in quotes, old Darlington and Stockton railway station at the town of Darlington, a few yards from the first station that ever existed. I was there for 15 years. I used to go on duty about 8 p.m. and came off at 6 a.m. I had been there a little while, perhaps 2 or 3 years, and at about midnight or 12:30 a.m., I was feeling rather cold, standing here and there. So I said to myself, I will go down and get something to eat. There was a porter's room where a fire was kept on, and a coal house was connected to it. So I went down the steps, took off my overcoat, and had just sat down on the bench opposite the fire, and turned up the gas, when a strange man came out of the coal house, followed by a black retriever dog. As soon as he entered, my eyes was upon him and his upon me, and we intently watched each other as he moved on to the front of the fire. There he stood looking at me, and a curious smile came over his countenance. He had a stand-up collar and a cutaway coat with gilt buttons and a Scotch cap. All at once he struck me, and I had the impression that he had hit me. I, with my fist, had struck back at him. My fist seemed to go through him and struck against the stove above the fireplace and knocked the skin off of my knuckles. The man seemed to be struck back into the fire and uttered a strange, unearthly squeak. Immediately the dog gripped me by the calf of my leg and seemed to cause me pain. The man recovered his position, called off the dog, and with a short click of the tongue, and then went back into the coal house, followed by the dog. I lighted my dark lantern and looked into the coal house, but there was neither dog nor man, and no outlet for them by which they could exit. I was satisfied that what I had seen was ghostly, and it accounted for the fact that when the man had first come into the place where I was sat, I had no I had not challenged him. The next day, for several weeks, my account caused quite a commotion, and a host of people spoke to me about it. Among the rest, old Edward Pease, father of the railway, and his 3 sons, John, Joseph, and Henry. Old Edward sent for me to his house and asked all the particulars. He and others put this question to me: "Are you sure that you were not asleep and had a nightmare?" My answer was quite sure, and it had not been a nightmare in the cellar, and I was just going to get something to eat. I was certainly not under the influence of strong drink, for I was then, as I have been for 49 years, a teetotaler, which I assume is he drinks tea and no alcohol. My mind at the time was perfectly free from trouble. What increased the excitement was the fact that a man, a number of years before, who was an employee of the office of the station, had committed suicide and was carried into the very cellar. I knew nothing of this circumstance, nor of the body of the man, but Mr. Pease and others who had known him told me the description exactly corresponded to his appearance and the way he dressed. And also he had a black retriever, just like the one that gripped me. I should add that no mark or effect remained on the spot where I seemed to be seized. Here is a witness to his character. This is a little more difficult to read. I give you that up front. His name is Mr. Kendall. Mr. Durham was attended by a church for 25 years, and I have testimony going back that length of time to the effect that he has given the same account of the extraordinary experiences. It is a long time since he retired from the post of the night watchman, and he has since become a wealthy man. He is one of the strongest men. Catch this, what he does. He is one of the strongest men I have ever met, able to do his 40 miles a day, walking and running with the hounds, and no feel of stiffness the next day. I forwarded this strange narrative to Professor Sidgwick, president of the SPR, who expressed a wish for fuller assurance that Mr. Durham was not asleep at the time of the vision. I give him in reply the following 4 reasons for believing he was awake, and he goes on and explains, it's more of his character and how the knuckles were bleeded, how he never lied, this and that and the other, and how he matched someone that he had never met when he described the ghost. The final part of this story: in October 2000, 2 amateur historians, Olive Howell and Eileen MacLeod, confirmed the identity of the ghost that appeared to James Durham. During a trawl at Darlington Archives, they found the death certificate of a ticket clerk called Thomas Monroe Winter, who committed suicide in 1845 at age 29. In a quote that was echoed in the Northern Echo, a woman told, "When we bought a copy of his death certificate, we were elated to find that his cause of death was shot himself with a pistol, being in a state of unsound mind, and his occupation was ticket clerk. We had found the ghost." So, just a couple of stories that seem to be validated by historians, honest people, and other people that would vouch for the character. I started off, like I said, with vampires, but I kind of thought that was pretty cool and would share it with you.
Heck yeah. Did you never asked me to show that other picture?
No, it's okay. I assume, the best I can tell, it is the book cover for the book that about the vampires. I wouldn't worry about it. It's not that important. But in case anyone wants that book name again, it's and like I said, I'm going to be reading bits and pieces of it along if any of you want to catch it or find it.
She's a redhead. She's a redhead. Look at there. Well, she's redhead.
The Vampire, His Kith and Kin by Montague Summers.
All right. Heck yeah. Thank you, brother.
Yeah.
That was absolutely badass. I love that. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to add a picture here, which I never ever do. I don't know why I ever don't think about that, but I'm going to share a picture. Tonight's story, kiddies, is called The Theater. And it is over on Creepypasta. I'm going to add the link to chat. So if you want to read along, you can. There it is. So, have you ever heard of an old PC game called The Theater? Yeah, I didn't think so. Probably because many people say it doesn't even exist. You see, The Theater is an old computer game released around the same time as Doom. Today, if you ever find it, it's only available on crappy bootleg CDs, which more often than not don't even actually contain the game. The actual legitimate copies that they say were released back in the day feature a blank cover with nothing but the sprite of what has since been named the Ticket Taker. He is simply a poorly drawn, pixelated Caucasian bald man, large red lips, wearing a red vest over a white shirt and black pants. He is completely emotionless, though some say that if you smash the disc, his face is shown as angry the next time you look at the cover. But this is just dismissed as an urban myth. What is peculiar about the theater, though, is that there is no developer named on the jewel case, nor a game description on the bag. It is simply the Ticket Taker on a white backdrop on both sides. The game was initially known for its inability to install correctly. The installation process immediately locks up the computer when the user reaches the licensing agreement. Also, strange about the licensing agreement for the theater is that whenever the development studio is supposed to be named, the text is simply a blank line. Anyway, most people who have claimed to own one of the original CDs say that they figured out how to install the game by simply rebooting their computer on the licensing agreement with the disc still inside. Then they are prompted to press I agree on startup. Then they can continue with the installation. The game then starts up without any instructions beside a main menu that is simply the sprite of a movie theater's exterior on an empty city street. The title fades in and then 3 menu buttons, new game, load, options. Selecting options immediately crashes the game to desktop. Load is said not to function at all, even though if you have a saved game, nothing happens when you press it. Thus, new game is the only menu option that actually works. Once it is selected, you are in the first person view, so you're in FPS mode. You are standing in an empty movie theater lobby, with the exception of the ticket taker standing in front of a dark hallway, which one can only assume leads to the theaters themselves. There's nothing to do but look at the poorly drawn, mostly eligible movie posters or approach the ticket taker. Once the player moves towards the ticket taker, a very low quality sound clip plays saying, "Thank you, please enjoy the movie," along with a speech box saying the same thing. You then walk into the hallway and the screen fades to black and you're back in the empty lobby and you do the exact same thing again and again and again. While this may sound like a really horrible game, a number of peculiar things occur as you continue to play it. The number of times that you have to continue into the hall after giving your ticket to the ticket taker before the strange event happens is unknown. Most state that it's completely random and could take anywhere from the first playthrough to the 400th. What happens, though, has deeply disturbed some players. First occurrence is when the player fades back in after walking into the hallway. This time they will notice the ticket taker is completely absent. The player then, without any other options, decides to walk into the dark hallway. The sound clip and text box mentioned previously still play in the absence of the ticket taker, but when the player walks into the hallway, the screen does not fade out. It goes pitch black as they walk deeper into the hall. But the player's footsteps, sound clips, is still playing as they continue to push the up button on their keyboard. Those claiming to have played the original game report to have felt extremely uncomfortable walking down the hallway, anticipating the whole way something horrible happening. Well, eventually the player is unable to move forward. There's nothing for a few moments before a strange sprite that is described as the ticket taker, but with a swirl for a face, appears and stands before the player. The original players of the game say their bodies immediately froze up and their stomachs churned when they saw this sprite, which has been appropriately named the Swirly Head Man. Nothing happens as Swirly-Head Man stands before them, then suddenly, piercing screech plays as the game glitches out. This lasts for a few minutes, with the screeching becoming continuous. Then the players abruptly return to the lobby with all the sounds and graphics being as they should. The game continues normally for the next couple of cycles of entering the hallway, a couple of the original players claiming that Swirly-Head Man would briefly appear and disappear in the corner of the screens as a brisk yelp sound plays. Then, at some point after meeting Swirly, the player sees the ticket taker pacing back and forth. Though there is no walking animation, the sprite limbs are completely static, so he just hops up and down slightly as a substitute. With his eyes being wide and his mouth open to stimulate a worried facial expression. Some players noted that the movie posters had been replaced with images of Swirly, which caused them to immediately turn their character's head away from the posters and approach the ticket taker. Then another different low-quality sound clip plays, but the speech box contains nothing but corrupted characters that cause whatever text that would have been in the box to be completely ineligible. Due to the extremely low quality of the sound, it is debated by players what exactly the ticket taker says at this point, though it is widely agreed that he says never reach the other levels. Then the screen fades out once again and returns the player back to the starting point in the lobby. But the ticket taker is gone and the hallway is blocked by a large brick wall sprite. Touching the brick wall will immediately crash the game. That's all there is. No one knows what the other levels are or how to gain access to them, nor is it known why the Swirly Man causes such an acute fear in those who have seen him in the game. All the original copies of the theater have either been lost or destroyed. The creepiest part is the fact that it is all the original players of the game claim to occasionally see a brief glimpse of the Swirly-Head Man out of the corner of their eyes. Now, there is a part 2 to this. And we're going to read this real quick. It's not something whispered about in certain circles. It's not something that comes up in a plain-looking jewel case. It's not by a nameless, untraceable developer, and it's certainly not supernatural. The game in question is indeed called The Theater, R before the E, and was developed by a company called Adega Software. Fairly certain it's an English company, despite the Spanish name. As far as I know, all they made was learning software. I have a mass suite from them somewhere around here. So the theater was probably meant to be some sort of entertainment or educational game, edutainment. The game was obviously never finished, probably from lack of funding or the whole company going under. The description of the story is actually pretty accurate. It's in a first-person perspective with flat sprites in a 3D-ish environment and glitchy as hell. The ticket taker has an egg-shaped body, and one of his hands is huge and misshapen. Think to look like he's reaching towards you for your ticket. The description of the Swirly-Head Man is also accurate, just a glitch version of the ticket taker. Saw a few people saying that he looks like Gygas. That's not the case. The feature of his face are just swirled and are red because his lips are gigantic. I have absolutely no idea why this happened, because while there are a few character sprites in the game's resources, that isn't one of them. And just to clarify, the sprite is creepy. That's all. It's not terrifying. It's never filled me with a sense of dread. It's just creepy. The gameplay is pretty much exactly as stated in the story, so accurately, in fact, that I think the author just downloaded it somewhere and decided to make a scary story out of his experience. I'll admit that some things in it can be unsettling, but not, oh my god, crap your pants, scary. Like I said, the game is unfinished and very glitchy. I think the idea is to select a movie from the poster on the wall, enter the theater, and play a minigame. The minigames are glitchy and missing resources, to the point of being almost unplayable. There doesn't seem to be a time limit on any of them, so you just have to plow through until you've done something right enough times to be dumped into the lobby. What's described in the story is what happens if you don't select a movie. You'll be allowed to enter the theater, but since the parameter of which game needs to load hasn't been set, you'll just be dumped back into the lobby. Here's where it gets a bit weird. If you continue to enter the theater without choosing a movie, odd, sometimes creepy things will happen. I'm not sure why, but if I were to make an educated guess, it would be that glitching past the mini games causes some variable to reach values that they weren't meant to, resulting in things appearing where they shouldn't. Or, the game is just glitchy to all hell and back. It's been years, but here are some of the effects I can remember. The swirly head man, movie posters appearing out of the frame, textures changing color, legitimately disturbing audio issues, other characters that you never meet anywhere else in the game, other areas. The last two are obviously the most interesting ones. Sometimes you'll spawn in a small room with a black floor and green walls, which will crash the game if touched. Sometimes you'll appear in a room similar to the lobby with a concession stand. There's a woman behind the counter with an incredibly poor drawn popcorn machine and soda fountain. But it's all just an image on the wall. It's basically just a big yellow concession stand. I don't remember if you can interact with it or not. The only character that appears worth talking about is a guy in a brown jacket who appears on the sidewalk outside of the lobby. Looking back, I don't think the story mentions this, but to the left of where you start out, the wall is a row of glass doors looking out onto the street outside the theater. If you glitch past the minigames enough, a man in a weird-looking jacket, I think it's supposed to be tweed, it's a mess, with a huge smile on his face, will be just on the other side of the door staring at you. And I mean a huge smile, like Freaky Fred or Spark Brushel. Google image search it if you want. Since he has the same body shape as the ticket taker, he looks a bit like the mayor from The Nightmare Before Christmas. His smile isn't creepy, though. It's just broad. What is creepy are his eyes. While the ticket taker, Ashtray, and other sprites will always face you, the smiling guy is just anchored in place like one of the walls. His eyes, however, are always staring right at you. Just thinking about that gives me chills. Well, there's nothing overtly scary or supernatural about the game itself. That's one thing that I would admit legitimately scares me, like a porcelain doll that always follows you. It's pretty much all there is to the theater. If you can find it somewhere, I'd recommend downloading it just to see what it's like. Oh, one thing I forgot. As stated in the story, getting the thing to run is, to say the least, difficult. I think someone got a hold of all the code and resources and just compiled it and added their own installer or something. Again, there's nothing paranormal about the installation. It just doesn't work well. By all means, go out and get yourself a copy, ladies and gentlemen. Make sure you install it the right way and have some fun.
I'm sure you caught on Ticket Taker in both stories. That's just weird. I mean, that really, we don't plan this, people. What's it happen? 50% of the time at least?
Yeah, 50% of the time at least.
With the myriad of stories in history that's involved, the chances of that happening are infinitesimally small. And it does.
We don't plan ahead of time. We don't coordinate. By the time I know what he's talking about, it's too late for me to go back and pick something. So
weird.
Fun.
Really weird.
Yeah. Weird and fun. Thank you all so very much for coming and hanging out with Adega and me tonight. I know I'll be back on tomorrow with Daybob, Purple Valkyrie, and Rambling Canuck for the Space Above and Beyond.
A good show.
Yes. Yes, we're going to be reviewing episode 3 and 4. It should be a lot of fun. Thank you all for being here. I hope to see you all in the morning. Thank you, Adega, for being here tonight and doing this.
Oh, gee, thanks for letting me on.
I'm letting you on. Yeah. You gotta twist my arm to do these at night. And Psychodorf 9, thank you. You too, Heterodine. You too, Heterodine. Thank you. Thank you, Psychodorf 9. So, thank you for being here tonight, Adega. Thank you all for coming by and listening to us. And we will be back next week as always.
You got it.
Everyone have a great one. Be excellent to each other. Seriously, the world's going through too much shit right now not to be excellent to each other. Be excellent to each other. And we will be back next week. Take care, everybody.
Good night.
These videos are tremendous. Like, comment, and subscribe, and hammer that notification bell.